This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian. I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
Look, some of us are lazy, alright?
If by lazy you mean wrong.
Prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide whether the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because guess what? This film is lit. A celebration of exploration, science, the resiliency of the human spirit, and potatoes. It's The Martian, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to the 23rd episode of This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. Today is the 2015 film The Martian, based on the 2011 book The Martian by Andy Weir. We're going to get right into our first segment. Let me sum up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
Sometimes we do two summaries. This one, the book and the movie are close enough in their broad strokes that we're just going to go with one summary. So I'm going to give you a little brief synopsis here of The Martian. Astronaut Mark Watney is part of a 6-man crew, which is part of the Ares program, which is the United States, NASA specifically's manned missions to Mars. They're on Ares 3, which is the third such mission to Mars. On their the crew consists of Mark Watney, Commander Lewis, Beck, Vogel, Johansson, and Martinez. Those are our 6 crew members. On their 6th day of their mission on Mars, or Sol 6, as it were, there's a sandstorm that forces them to abandon their mission, or else they would be stranded there because their rocket would fall over. During this storm, Mark Watney is struck by a piece of debris, resulting in what they think is his death, because his vitals go flat. So they leave. Turns out he wasn't dead. The rest of the book is about Mark Watney surviving on Mars until hopefully somebody can come back and get him. And then we also cover what's going on Earth during this time, what's going on with the crew during this time, and how Mark Watney hopes to get off of Mars. So that's your brief summary, without getting into the specifics, which we'll get into in all of our segments. We do not have a Guess Who this week because Andy Weir specifically and intentionally did not describe characters in his... You get some description of them throughout, but it's all broken up and it's very minimal. More so, it's like things about them than how they look. Like the things with Lewis and the disco and that sort of thing. So there's more character things we find out about them, but not so much what they look like. So we can't really do a Guess Who. I will say this instead of Guess Who, I thought the casting was pretty much spot on from what I felt reading the book.
Yeah.
Everybody that they cast felt perfect for the role that they cast them in, based on their personalities and that sort of thing. I thought they couldn't have done a better job. So in terms of, their personality, how they act, the way they go about their stuff, my least favorite casting is Matt Damon. But that's not even because I don't like it. It's just, I think he does a great job. I think it would have been maybe better with a lesser name, but that's about it.
Interesting.
But again, he's great. He does a good job, and he's good in the role. I just think if they would have went with a slightly lesser known actor, it might have been more interesting for its own reasons. But he does a great job, so I have no problem with him as Mark Watney. Let's get in to our new first segment at this point. Not new, but now our first segment. Send the book.
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
Katie, we watched the movie The Martian last night. Mm-hmm. I'm going to move this book so I don't smack it over and over, which I have a bad tendency to do, which picks up on the mic. What do you want to know if it was in the book or not?
All right. I have a few things.
Okay.
My first thing.
Yes.
So the movie starts out, and I think I'm saying this right, in media res.
Yes. That's probably how you say it.
Yeah.
The movie starts out with during the sandstorm.
Right.
Well, right before it.
Right before it, we get a couple minutes of, like, character building interactions among the crew, and then we go right into the super dramatic sandstorm where they have to abandon their mission.
Yes.
So the movie kind of starts off by showing us how he got stranded on Mars.
Right.
And obviously, the book is going to be a little different, I would assume, since it's his journal. Mm-hmm. But does it start out similarly? Or how long do we have to wait into the book until we know how or why he's stranded there?
We find out he's stranded immediately, but it starts very differently. We start with his first journal entry, and the first line of the book, which they did a similar thing early with Mark Watney. It's the first line of the book, and obviously we're not safe for work all the time, but the first line of the book, log entry Sol 6, I'm pretty much fucked. That's my considered opinion, fucked. And so it starts out after he is back in the hab, after the storm.
Okay.
And he then goes on during that first chapter, that first journal entry, to describe what happened. Mm-hmm. He's kind of sets up the whole mission and everything. He lays out the whole first chapter is kind of like a background on what the Ares missions are, what everything, who was on the crew, all this stuff, and what happened during the storm. We then also get on page 135, we get a third person retelling of the storm events.
Okay.
That is most similar to what we see at the beginning of the movie. In fact, it's so similar that it's like line for line identical. Because I was flipping through while we were watching the movie, trying to, because it opens on the storm, and I was like, oh yeah, that's not till like page 135 where we get Mark Watney's telling of basically what happened, or like in the first chapter, but we don't get the actual omniscient narrator version of it, which we get, on 135. Where we get everybody else's perspective on what was going on. In the early part, we just get Watney going and then I was hit by a thing, and then I got back into the hab. So there's a slight difference. And I think the way we'll talk about it, but I think that makes sense. Obviously, how they did it in the movie, as opposed to just opening up. I think you could have done it. You could have opened up the movie. Could have opened up with a video camera, like they used for the journal entries in this movie, of Matt Damon sitting there going, well, I'm fucked. That would have been an okay cold opening too.
Yeah, that would
and then cut back to the storm, which is kind of how the book does it. They could have done it that way, but I think with the way they did it was fine, which is jumping right in with them on Mars and kind of setting all the character interactions up and then getting right into the storm, which is the event that sets off everything.
Yeah, no, and I think it was important to have those character interactions going into the story proper.
Yeah.
So that we could see them interact at least a little bit before he got left all by his lonesome.
That's the thing that you don't get in the beginning of the book, is you get nothing of any of the other characters. You don't really meet any of them until page 50 or something, when we finally leave Mars. It's just Watney and his thoughts and his his telling of the events that happened. So you never know what any of the other characters were saying. You never get what was going on with them while they were on the Mav and stuff like that. It's just Watney talking about, I got hit by a thing, then I woke up and, I wasn't dead.
Yeah.
And then I made my way back to the hab, that sort of thing. So.
Interesting.
Yep.
Interesting. All right, coming off of that, and I think I might know the answer to this because you kind of alluded to it while you were talking. Does he sustain a horrific puncture wound and subsequently have to perform surgery on himself?
Yes. Short answer, yes. Long answer, I'll get into a little more in a later segment, in our Better in the Movie, Better in the Book segments. But short answer, yes. He gets hit by, because it's pivotal to the story, he gets hit, the antenna, the satellite dish from the top of the hab gets ripped off by the storm, and that's what hits him. And that's important because when the satellite dish gets ripped off, he can no longer talk to Earth. That was his they call it a communication array, I think. That's what hits him and disappears into the distance. And so, yes, he does get impaled, but there's a slight difference, which we'll talk about. But he does get hit by debris and stabbed and has a hole in his suit and is worried that is what ends up making them think he's dead, because it gets punctured through the bio thing that keeps his life vitals thing.
Yeah.
It gets destroyed, and so that's part of the reason they think he's dead, is because he flatlines on everything.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, that does happen.
Does Mark Watney use a cross to make fire?
Yes, he does. That is this movie overall is incredibly faithful adaptation. Even more so than I remembered. For most of it, they cut some things because it's a 365-page book, and it would be tough to get everything. They do cut some things, and then they add and change a couple things, mainly at the very end, which we'll get to. But yeah, he uses a cross because it's the only thing he can burn.
Right.
So he has to use it to make water. He needs to burn hydrazine in order to create hydrogen, and that whole process is a lot more involved in the book. They kind of streamline a lot of the sciencey stuff for the sake of the movie.
Oh,
which
really?
We'll get to.
I
Yeah.
really felt like there was just so much math in this movie.
Oh, if you think there's a lot of math and science in this movie,
they're just shouting numbers at me.
if you think that's the case in the movie, the book is tenfold that. Which I really enjoyed and found really interesting. And I think he does a very good job in the book of making it digestible. As digestible as you can make chemistry and explaining how when he burns hydrazine.
We had an audio dropout here for about 15 seconds. Didn't really say anything super important, just expanded on the fact that Andy Weir does a really good job of making the science and the chemistry and the math pretty accessible in the book. The movie just streamlines it even more, and then I go on to continue talking about Martinez's cross.
Was that Martinez, who's a devout Catholic? That's the only time it's really mentioned. He brings a little wooden cross as his personal item, and so Mark Watney cuts it up in order to burn it. And there's some interesting symbolism there, that you could discuss with him destroying a religious icon in order to do science. But it's also, they also have a similar line in the book where because in the movie he says I think you'd understand, or I'm counting on you to forgive, or something like that. He kind of makes a joke, which is kind of in line with his personality. I would say it's pretty safe to say Mark Watney in the book is not a religious person. It's never really overtly discussed, but it's kind of the vibe you get. But yes, that is in the book.
All right. Okay, so the head of NASA.
Yeah, Teddy. Played by Jeff Daniels.
Yes.
Teddy.
So, he's not a villain, but they kind of play him like one a little bit. And I'm pretty
That's on
sure,
purpose.
Yeah, I know why they do it, but I'm wondering if it was the same in the book.
It is very much the same. The way that whole relationship is to represent the guy. There's the guy thinking about Teddy's the head of NASA. He's thinking big picture.
Right.
He's thinking big picture stuff. He's not a villain, but he knows. He's thinking about, okay, he's literally like when it gets to later in the movie and they have to make decisions about, okay, are we gonna take a chance? And that's a similar idea in the book, or where are we gonna take a high percentage chance of saving 6 people or a low percentage chance of saving 1 person? And he goes, or of losing, you know what I mean, the opposite, whatever. So it's a high percentage of failure that they'll be able, that if they just try to save Mark Watney, it's a low chance he'll make it back, but if that happens, only he dies. Versus if we send all of the astronauts back to Mars, it's a higher percentage chance they'll save them, but there's also a chance then that they could die. So he has to weigh those things. Like, he's, as the head of NASA, making these really tough calls about publicity, because he's also weighing, like, they have future Ares missions planned and they want to make sure they still have funding for those, and if they lose all 6 astronauts, there's a way greater chance that they're not going to be able to do those missions. So he's weighing all these different things and being forced to make really difficult decisions. And they do play him against Mitch and Venkat Vincent in the movie, which we'll talk about to some extent. They play against each other as sort of that the bureaucracy of
Right.
of an organization like that.
Right, because what we've got here, we talked a little bit, I think we mentioned in the prequel episode at least, the kind of parallel action.
Yes.
Within this story, where we have one story that's Mark Watney hanging out on Mars and growing potatoes.
Yeah.
And then the other story is everybody back on Earth trying to figure out what to do about Mark Watney on Mars growing potatoes.
Yeah.
So obviously on Mars, our conflict is like man versus nature.
Yes. Yeah, man versus nature. Yeah, it is. Yeah, 100%.
But we need a conflict back on Earth.
Yes. And it is, and it's a very, to me, it's a very real conflict. Mm-hmm. It feels very real, and it does cast Teddy, who's the head of NASA, a bit as a villain, but he's also, it's a very understandable perspective that he brings to the table. He's thinking really big picture. Mm-hmm. And in a lot of different angles, whereas Mitch is thinking, well, it's just, they're the astronauts. Because Mitch is the head of the Hermes crew. They all have slightly different, like, Vincent is head of the Ares program, I think. And then I'm trying, because they're all slightly they're almost all like, Teddy's the head of NASA, but then Vincent and Mitch have slightly different jobs. Like, I think Mitch is the, maybe the flight controller or something like that. Mm-hmm. So his whole thing is he's really close with the astronauts, and he's like, we should tell them and let the astronauts make the decision. Right. Because it's Commander Lewis, she's in charge, she should be able to make that decision. We shouldn't be making that for them back here. But then Teddy, as the head of NASA, is like, well, that's my decision to make, and I say we do this because I'm thinking about the future. They're thinking about, the astronauts are going to be thinking, we want to save Mark. I have to think about them and Mark and 10 missions down the road in the future. So, it kind of, it is an interesting back and forth, and it does create a good conflict where you kind of like, why are you being a shithead, Teddy? Just let him make the decision, but at the same time, you get why he's that way. So, but yeah, it's a bit of a villain, but not really.
Okay. Does Mark dip a potato in crushed Vicodin? Or was he actually doing that, or was that just a joke? Because I couldn't really tell. He
was actually doing it. He doesn't, unless it's, I could be missing it, but he doesn't dip a potato in Vicodin in the book, but he does take Vicodin quite a bit, a handful of times, because he ends up hurting himself a lot doing stuff, even more so than you really see in the movie. Like the explosion that happens. There's a part really later in the book where he's moving a bunch of rock, and he throws his back out really bad and spends like a week just like doped up on Vicodin healing and stuff like that. And you kind of see the wear and tear on him at the end of the movie where he's all...
Yeah, he looks pretty haggard.
Yeah, well, he's like super thin because he's on super low rations and he's kind of beat up and that sort of stuff. And yeah, he gets hurt routinely throughout the course of the book and takes a lot of Vicodin, but doesn't ever dump it on a plate and eat it with a potato. At least not that he mentions. But I thought that made sense. I thought that was a fun little way, because like I said, they do, it references the Vicodin because he does take it quite a bit in the book. But I thought it was a clever way to do that and kind of make a joke out of it. Yeah. So I thought it worked.
Mark Watney, space pirate. Does he call himself a space pirate?
Yes, he does. He 100% does. And it's the exact same description it's the exact same plays out the exact same way in the book, where he's talking about in the movie he does it to the camera about how on Mars they're under maritime law, and technically once he gets to Ares 4 he's not been given express permission to take Ares 4, so at that point he'll be commandeering a ship in international waters under maritime law, which technically makes him a pirate. So he's a space pirate. That's his explanation, and it kind of works. He's mostly being silly, but he did. That is exactly pretty much word for word in the book.
That was probably my favorite part.
Yeah.
Was there a slight, very, very slight romantic subplot between the Winter Soldier and Kate Mara? Mara?
I don't know how you pronounce it. Mara? I don't know. One of them. Yes. It's actually more, it's bigger there's more of it in the book. It's just really that one scene in the movie where at the end where she kisses him on the faceplate.
It kind of almost comes out of nowhere.
I bet because there's an extended version. Honestly, when we were watching the movie, or when we went to rent the movie, I saw there was an extended version that was like 20 minutes longer. I'm sure there's more of that in there. There's not a lot of it in the book. It's like 4 or 5 scenes. There is that exact scene at the end where he's going out on the spacewalk or whatever, and she kisses his faceplate, and she even says, "Don't tell anybody I did that," which is the exact line she has. So that happens. There's some things earlier where at one point Watney is writing letters to all of them during the time he thinks he's going to die. After the first probe with all the food in it crashes, he's pretty much sure he's going to die. And so one of the psychologists back on Earth tells him to send, he should send letters to all of his crewmates and talk to them as part of his coming to terms with the situation thing or something like that. So each chapter starts off with a letter to a different crewmate for a while in the book. And one of them, he sends a letter to Beck saying, "You should go for it with Johansson," or something like that. Like, she likes you too, or something to that allusion. And then there's a moment later in the book where one of the bedrooms on the spaceship is messed up. Like, the heating isn't working in it. The heating isn't working in it because they've extended their mission for so long.
Less scandalous than I thought it was.
It gets more scandalous, kind of. Not really. But one of the bedrooms isn't working because the heating's messed up because they've extended their mission by a year or whatever. And so she goes, I think it's Martinez's room. And she says, "Martinez, you can sleep in Johansson's room. Johansson, you can just keep sleeping in Beck's room." And they're like, "What?" And she's like, "We all know. Just don't let it affect your work."
I don't know how you could possibly think you could keep that a secret on a 6-man space mission.
5-man at this point, because Watney's not back yet. But yeah, and so she kind of makes she's like, "Look, we all know. It's fine. Just don't let it affect your job, basically."
And then they have a baby at the end?
No.
Oh,
then we never get to that. Oh, we'll talk about that later.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, and so there was a few more moments of that.
I was curious because I know Hollywood does have a tendency to add romantic plots to things that previously maybe did not have romantic plots.
That definitely felt like it could have easily been an ad.
Yeah.
But no, it's in the book and it's more apparent in the book. Or it's made reference to more in the book. Honestly, that little scene at the end almost felt more like something where she kisses him. As a thing for people who read the book. Yeah, we didn't forget about this. It happens. You know what I mean? Because there's nothing else with it in the whole movie, pretty much. So, yeah.
I'm going to skip my next question and come back to it.
Okay.
Does he become a professor at the end of the book?
No.
No.
Well, maybe, but we don't ever see that.
Oh, okay. All right. I thought that was kind of a nice denouement.
Yeah. That's the thing. The book doesn't have a denouement. He gets back on the ship, and then the book ends.
Okay.
He gets back on, and they got him, and then he has a little journal on the ship that he gives a nice little spiel about. He gives a little spiel about everybody coming back, everybody on Earth and everything, and humanity coming together to save him. And it's a nice little thing about how ultimately humans, that's what we're about. We're about coming together and uniting and all that stuff. And it's like a little feel good wrap up at the end about how everybody came together to save him, basically. And then it just ends. There's no epilogue or denouement. There's nothing after he gets back on the ship. So.
Okay. All right. This is my last. Was that in the book? It's the big one. I saved it till the end on purpose. Does Mark Watney, or does he not, Iron Man his way into the Hermes?
I'm just going to say one word right now, no, and we'll get to it later.
Okay.
Teaser, but the answer is no.
That very much felt like a movie ad.
We'll get there. Let's move along to Lost, an adaptation.
Just show me the way to get out of here, and I'll be on my way.
Where is it lost?
Yes, and I want to get unlost as soon as possible.
All right. What were you confused about?
Okay, so I don't know if you're going to be able to answer this question because it might be a better question for an astronaut.
I think I can.
So they have to abandon their Mars mission because the storm was going to make their spaceship flip over. So why would they take that kind of ship? Why wouldn't they have a different kind of ship that's not gonna topple over because it's not cheap to go to Mars?
Right. Okay. It's a multifaceted answer to this one. First, because that's the design the ship can be, most likely. They have to have a really powerful rocket. It's a giant rocket, or the rocket section. And now in the We don't really know exactly what it looks like in the book. They don't ever really describe it, but I assume it looks pretty similar because it is the same problem of the winds are going to tip it over. And if it tips too far or if it and falls over, then they can't get it back up. So they're fucking stuck there. So my guess would be one is why they make it that way. It's probably really rare for this type of problem. The first 2 missions didn't have it happen. It's possible, but it's rare for the storms to get so strong that it would tip the thing over. This is like a worst case scenario. Okay, if the winds hit blank, whatever, 170 kilometers an hour, whatever they said, that'll cause the MAV to tip, and then we won't be able to launch. So we got to get out of here before that happens. But it's super rare to have storms that speed, would be my guess. Second, it's all bullshit. This is the gimme for the book in terms of the science and the physics. The fastest that the storms on Mars get is like 60 miles an hour, and because the air is so much less dense, it would never tip over a giant rocket, no matter how much, like, at the fastest speeds that Mars has. So this is, and he knew this when writing it.
It seems like a big science plot hole
It's
to me.
it's his, from what he said, that he knew this. It was his one, I'm going to take this to make my story work.
Okay, all
and then
right.
everything else I'm going to do is pretty much as close to the actual science as he can do. So that's sort of like, the way he describes it from what I've seen in interviews is like, that was my one, like, okay, this is the fiction part of the science fiction. Somehow there's a windstorm that's fast enough, even in Mars atmosphere, to potentially knock the rocket over. So that's why they have to leave. And that also allows the thing to blow the thing off and hit Mark. And, it kind of allows everything to happen. And that was his way of coming up with a good situation to get all of the other astronauts off and leave one of them there.
Right. It's the, what's it called? The inciting incident.
Yes. Yeah. And his inciting incident was where he kind of flubbed the science intentionally.
All right. Okay. I wanted a clarification. In the movie, he's making like a video diary. He's like vlogging, basically. Is he doing the same in the book, or is he like physically writing a journal?
He's writing in a computer, like a journal in a computer. Except for one part, which we'll talk about later, he does an audio journal for a specific reason. But yeah, the rest of it, it's he's just writing it.
Okay.
But this is where we were talking about in the prequel episode. How do they translate a written journal to film form? They do a lot of it where it's not epistolary. A lot of it is just us watching Mark Watney. Yeah. But they still keep that element by having his webcam or, his video logs that he does throughout. And they use it quite a bit because they have the cameras on the spacesuits and they have the cameras in the rovers. Yeah. They use it a lot of different ways. On top of just him literally talking to the camera, they use it, when him doing stuff, they cut between a camera that's not there and a camera that is there in the universe, which was interesting and a cool way to do that. But yeah, so that was an interesting, and I thought not clever. It's the way you would do an epistolary format in this thing where we're not just watching Mark Watney type. He can just talk to the camera.
That would not be terribly riveting.
No.
Okay, so I think you mentioned in the prequel, and correct me if I'm wrong, but in the book he's not a botanist.
He is.
Oh, he is?
Yeah.
I thought you said he wasn't.
If I did, I misspoke. He is.
Okay.
I might have said maybe he isn't, but it was before he's the botanist.
Okay.
He's a botanist, and he has another type, like another specialty.
Well, maybe that's what I was thinking.
Like maintenance guy or something. Like literally, like he's the two best things he could be.
Yeah.
To be it's stuck. Like if Johansson or if any of the other ones were the people that were stuck there, they were screwed probably.
Yeah.
He was a botanist, and he was good at fixing things. Like, Johansson's like the computer person. She does all the computer stuff. Vogel's their chemist. He might have been okay. Because he's also, like, into, like, he can, like, make technology. And, like, he's a chemist, so he knows some of the science of, like, growing plants, probably figure it out. Commander Lewis is, she's the commander. She has some science. She's a geologist, too, I think. And then Martinez is a pilot. He would be screwed. Like, he wouldn't. So, yeah, he's literally, like, the only one that probably would have been able to survive in the situation. Which we'll get, and this isn't really going to go anywhere. We're going to talk about it right here. It's one of my biggest problems with the book, and I get why I really like the book, but I get why they did this, is that Mark Watney doesn't have flaws, really. At no point in the book is there anything that he does that he messes up. He makes mistakes when he almost blows himself up and stuff like that. He makes mistakes, but it's more so like, oh, there was a little thing he forgot. Mm-hmm. And it's not like a flaw, like he got too emotional in the moment, or, you know what I mean? It's never a character flaw. It's just, I was doing the math and I forgot about one thing, and that almost killed me, which is interesting, and I like it, and I get what they were going for because they are astronauts. None of them really have flaws necessarily. The one who has the most apparent flaw of anybody is Commander Lewis, and her flaw is just that she's incredibly hard on herself, and she feels incredibly responsible for Watney being stuck there, even though she shouldn't feel responsible.
I don't know if being an astronaut precludes you from having character flaws.
No, I agree. I don't disagree. But when you read a lot about astronauts and when they're on their mission, they're pretty much like they don't mess around when they're picking astronauts out. They do a lot of psychological testing. They do a lot of all kinds of testing to make sure that when you get up there, you're not going to be somebody who freaks out or gets too emotional. Like, they don't let those people be astronauts. So it kind of makes sense. And that's one of the things I really liked about the book is that when faced with these situations, he never freaks out. He never, I mean, he does to some extent. There are chapters where initially he's like, well, I'm dead, fuck this. And then like he'll have an addendum on his log entry where it's like, all right, maybe I'm not dead. Here's one, so he has brief moments of like freaking out, but even then he gets over them really quick. But I like that because I think it is a realistic portrayal of how astronauts work. Like they're literally a different breed of human. They really are. Like, NASA just doesn't pick people that are gonna like not be able to keep their head on their shoulders when shit hits the fan. And because that's always such a problem I have in other movies, and I don't want to bring up Prometheus too much, but like in Prometheus, where they hire a bunch of scientists and astronauts to go on this mission, and they're all idiots. They all like freak out at every little thing, and they like, as soon as something goes wrong, they're all like, we're all gonna die, and that is not how astronauts operate. If something goes wrong, and how he says in the end of the movie, he goes, you work the problem. Yeah. You figure out what's the problem, then you fix that problem, and then you have another problem. You figure it out. Like, that's just how they operate, and I like that there's a reasonably realistic portrayal of that in media, because you rarely ever see it. Mm-hmm. I like that about it. But that is still a slight problem with the book, is that I'm like, this guy doesn't have any flaws. Like, he's just Mark Watney, uber botanist, surviving on Mars, and like he's just fine.
Yeah, and I think there probably could have been a way to give him some kind of flaw without making it. Yeah. Oh, there's no way this guy could have been an astronaut because of this thing. Right.
I think what they could have done is had him have a few moments where he was a little more, when things got to their worst levels, where he was a little more dejected and not checked out, but where he became more sort of unhinged to some extent, and sort of not just constantly optimistic in the face of incredible odds. And there are moments where he becomes pessimistic and whatever, but they go away. They're so brief and they go away so quickly that it's a little like, he just kind of doesn't. He faces a lot of hardship. It's the man versus nature thing. It's all the conflict is nature. It's never anything with him. Yeah. It's never anything internal, really. There's a little bit of it here and there, but it's very fleeting. Anyways, I got off on a topic.
Okay, so there's a point in the movie where they figure out how to IM with him, basically. Yeah. The scientists back on Earth. So they're like chatting with each other. And he finds out that the crew doesn't know he's still alive, and then he types something rude. But they don't tell us what it is.
Yeah, you just see everybody react. Yeah. Like, oh.
So, does the book tell us what he says, or is that even part of the book? I guess that's kind of was that in the book?
Yes, to some extent. Kind of. So, they tell him we didn't tell the crew. He says some other stuff, but then at the end of one of his message, he says, also, tell the crew I'm alive. What the fuck is wrong with you? Mm-hmm. And they said, blah, blah, blah. They say some stuff. And then at the end of that, they say, also, please watch your language. Everything you type is being broadcast live all over the world. To which he responds, look, a pair of boobs, and then types open parentheses, period, whatever that, like a Y or whatever, period, close parentheses, so it looks like boobs. That's what happens in the book in that instance. The implication in the movie to me is more like he writes out like, go fuck yourself, you fuck, like, you know what I mean? Because they even say that. They said like he used the gerund and like he uses the F word like 4 different ways is what they say. Because they kind of describe it. But yeah, in the book he like is being a goober and just like, look, boobs. And draws boobs and yep.
So maybe his flaw could be that he's just a little immature.
He is. That honestly is his biggest flaw, is that he's immature. But it's never negatively affects him anyway.
All right, so the last thing I have for Lost in Adaptation. This wasn't really clear to me when we watched the movie. So can you explain what causes the Hab to blow up and destroy the potato crop?
Yes. And it's one of the things I want to talk about in Better in the Book. But I can explain what happens. Basically, the Hab was not designed to be used for as long as he uses it. It was designed for like a 31-day mission. And he's at the point where that blows up hundreds of days in. And it also wasn't meant for as many. He goes out and does EVAs. Eventually, once he starts talking to NASA, he's going out to the rovers and stuff like multiple times a day, in and out, and he uses the same airlock every time. And it's just the wear and tear of using, because the Hab, and they don't really do a super great job of that, you can tell, but, and they talk about Hab canvas later, but the Hab is, most of it is made out of, it's like a tent, like it's made of canvas, like super strong, crazy canvas, but it is made of canvas, and the airlocks are these big metal things that sit in entryways on one, or there's 3 of them technically, I think, on the Hab. There might be 4, but there's at least 3. And he uses the same one every time. And just the repeated wear and tear of pressurizing and depressurizing every time, it kind of moves the fabric a little bit each time. And he does it so many times, and it was only designed to be used for 31 days. Eventually, it just causes a split and explodes.
Okay.
Like the canvas just splits, and then when it loses pressure, the pressure of the, or when the hole forms, the pressure from inside the Hab of all the air ejects the airlock out. But I want to talk about that scene in Better in the Book. So is that what's next, or is it Better in the Movie next?
We can do either one, which way you want.
Let's do Better in the Movie first.
Okay.
We'll put a pin in the airlock sequence.
Okay.
Better in the Movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
All right, so this is tough. Better in the Movie is interesting because there are very few things that I thought were necessarily better in the movie. Just, this movie is a very faithful adaptation, and they do a really good job of translating everything I imagined reading the book onto the screen, relatively speaking.
That's a nice thing.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah. And so the first thing I had was what you described earlier. I kind of like watching the storm be the first thing, and then as opposed to starting out with Watney kind of describing everything, I like just jumping right into the action. I thought worked pretty well. The spacesuits, this isn't better in the movie so much as well done in the movie, because we don't really see or get the spacesuits described in the book. But the spacesuits in The Martian are like my favorite spacesuits in any movie ever, maybe.
Really?
They're super duper cool. Like in terms of like realistic astronaut suits. The orange, specifically the orange ones, I guess they're not spacesuits. They're EVA suits. The ones that they were on the surface of Mars. Because they also have like actual like spacesuits that they like when they're at the end of the movie, the white one he's in.
Yeah. Not
those. Those are fine. Those look like normal NASA ones. But the ones they have specifically for on Mars are super cool with the big glass helmets, and then like the armor kind of looking, and they're orange, and they got their names on them. They're really, really cool. Adam Savage is making a replica of one right now. They sent him a copy of one of the actual suits from the movie, and he took pictures of it and got all the measurements, and now he's making his own because he lives the best life.
They make them orange so that they could blend in with the surface of Mars.
It's camouflage in case they ran into any Martians. So, back to we talked about the impaling scene where he gets a piece of metal impaled in him. It happens in the book, but it's really quick, and he describes that he went back into the hab, pulled the piece of metal out, and then stitched himself shut. He does say he injected himself with morphine or whatever and then he stitched himself shut, and that was that. In the movie, they add the wrinkle, which I think is more realistic, and it makes for a really intense scene where he has to pull a hunk of metal out of himself.
Yeah.
That is not in the book. He just pulls the thing out and then stitches himself shut, like on the surface, which is fine. But I thought that it makes for a very, just intense scene right off the bat.
Probably the hardest thing to watch.
Yeah. And there's a really famous in history, like a guy in Antarctica operated on himself in a mirror.
Yeah.
It was like a thing that happened in reality, and it was very reminiscent of that kind of thing. And so I thought adding that where he had to pull something out just adds to that, like if he just pulled the thing out and then chunk himself shut, it would be all right. But going and digging around and pulling a hunk of metal out makes it way more intense. So I thought that was a fun change. What they do amazingly, and it's one of my favorite parts of the book, is the revelation of where Watney is going on one of his rover trips. It plays out almost identically, and I was writing this down because I didn't remember how it played out in the movie, but I was writing it down as I read the book that they do sort of a parallel action thing where Watney's driving around, and he says in his logs, he's basically the point he's testing his rover because he's been messing with the rover and stuff. He's testing it to see how far he can go with the new battery setup he has or whatever. But he says, but I have a plan on where I'm going, but he doesn't say where he's going. And then it cuts back to Earth, and they're watching him. They're like, where is he going? And it's that sort of thing. And it plays out where we figure out where he's going from Earth with Vincent and Mindy, I think, who was there, watching him. And they do it the exact same way. They literally, in the book, Vincent, and it's hard for me because so this is a better in the book thing. His name's Venkat in the book. His Venkat Kapoor. They changed it to Vincent Kapoor in the movie.
They anglicized
it. So I'll call him Vincent just because it's easier for me, and that's what it is in the movie. But so they're watching him and trying to figure out where he's going, and then Vincent, it kind of dawns on him, and he does run to the break room and pulls because it's the only place they have a giant map of Mars, apparently, I don't know, whatever. And he pulls a giant map of Mars off the wall because it shows where Pathfinder is, and he does the exact same thing. He grabs a ruler and he marks where Watney is and where he started and where he is now, and draws a line through it. And he's like, boom, he's going to Pathfinder, and you're like, oh shit, Pathfinder. Which I think is a fun reveal for space nerds, but also it's just really clever to have him go get Pathfinder so he can talk to Earth, see if he can figure out how to reboot it. So they do that. It plays out exactly how it does in the book, and it was very satisfying because I think that's a good reveal and a fun reveal, and I think they did it kind of perfectly in the movie. He does once he gets Pathfinder working, they do the hexadecimal communication thing. I didn't remember them doing that. I thought they changed it to him just using letters because they were worried it would confuse people, with what hexadecimals are. And they don't really go into it. They go into it more in the book. It's just a computer type of thing, like language type thing. And he does the same thing, and he even says in the movie, and I've forgotten all of this, he goes, we can't use letters because there's not enough degrees separating them. I wouldn't be able to tell what it's looking at, which is the same reason in the book. But he does get it working, and they've set up all the things, and that's how they're able to talk initially until he does eventually hack the rover so that they can type back and forth. The thing that I thought was interesting that the movie did and made sense visually was that they use a replica of Pathfinder on Earth that's doing the same thing the one on Mars is doing. That's never described in the book. They just are at a computer. Yeah. Like inputting commands and that sort of thing. They're not looking at a replica. But I thought it was interesting and it made sense and it makes for nice visual symmetry between.
Yeah, it helps, I think, make what's going on a little bit clearer to an audience.
Yeah, so I thought that was clever and that wasn't in the book. The running out of ketchup thing, he never mentions ketchup once in the book, unless I missed it and I'm blanking on it. But I was like, that makes perfect sense when he's eating nothing but potatoes for months and months, that it would be a bad day when you ran out of ketchup. So I thought that was funny that he makes that. I
had a note about that too. He runs out of ketchup, and I'm like, well, maybe if you hadn't been so cavalier with the ketchup at the beginning, because in the beginning of it, he's just like squirting it in the cups, all willy nilly. Yeah. Like, you gotta conserve that, man.
Yeah. The Purnell maneuver is a big part of the book and the movie, obviously. I think Donald Glover is great in the role, but I also think that the explanation scene is really well done, where he has everybody in the room and he's explaining it. That never happens in the book. I mean, there's a moment where they're in the room and he explains what he's talking about to like Vincent and Teddy and them to kind of discuss it, but there's never like, he doesn't do like a big visual like explanation with like pens and staplers, and I thought that was clever for the audience to figure out what he meant by this.
I mean, and when you move to a visual medium, you need a visual explanation.
Yeah. It's a visual explanation, and it's funny. It adds some levity to because Donald Glover does a good job of making it kind of silly. Yeah. With his sort of, his character's a little off, a little strange, and doesn't know who the head of NASA is, even though he works for NASA. But I thought that was well done. They cut a major. They trimmed down the rover expedition from the Hab to Ares 4, where he's going to fly up in the rocket. That's like the last 60 pages of the book. It's a long time in the book, and there's a lot of things that happen on it. There's a huge sandstorm that almost kills him. That's like cutting his, because it's a sandstorm and also this is better in the book, but he can't talk to NASA at this point, which they get rid of in the movie. He's just able to talk to him the whole time. There's a point where he ruins his communication system in the book after he's able to talk to him for a long time, and then he's back in the dark until he gets to the MAV again, or until he gets to Ares 4, where he's going to fly up, and then he can talk to him again because the MAV has a comm system. He accidentally fries Pathfinder when he's drilling holes in his... He's drilling holes in the rover so he can make it bigger, so he can put stuff in it, and he sets the drill on like a table, and the table has some stuff that is vaguely touching Pathfinder's circuitry, and the power from the drill connects through and fries Pathfinder, and he just can't talk to Earth anymore. And so he has to do a lot of it. It's an interesting stakes raising at the end, because he was going to have them help him through the explanation of how to do all these things that he needed to do to the rover to drive it 4,000 miles or whatever, and he has to figure it out, or he has to figure it out himself. They've already given him some information, but he has to kind of figure out the rest of it himself, which he's able to do. But so he's in the dark at the end, which is I kind of like that in the book, but in the movie they don't do that, and part of the reason is, I think, is that when they cut the sandstorm thing that happens, whereas if they could talk to him, that wouldn't be a problem, because in the book it's a problem, the sandstorm, because he can't see it. It's like so subtle, but once he gets into it, there won't be enough light for him to get out of it, because his solar panels won't recharge enough because the air will be too blocked. And they have no way to tell him about this storm, whereas if they could talk to him, they'd just be like, hey, you're driving into a storm, you need to go this way. So they got rid of that. And then also at one point he crashes the rover and flips it over and breaks a bunch of stuff and has to flip it back over and reconnect the rover and the trailer. It's a thing. I actually like that they kind of streamlined all that stuff out at the end, because it kind of feels like it's not stalling, but at that moment you're worried about, let's get to the end where he's going to fly in a rocket up into space.
Right.
He survived all this stuff here, and now we're about to get to the part where he's going to fly into a rocket into space and see, the actual climax of the film. This just kind of feels like padding.
Yeah, feels a little like extra.
Yeah, we don't really need that. He got there, sure, it was rough getting there, but it's not super necessary. This one I'm torn on. So in the movie, they change it. In the book, Beck is the EVA specialist. He is in the movie too. EVA stands for extravehicular activity. In the book, Beck is the one who goes out and gets Watney.
Okay.
In the movie, they make Commander Lewis go back and suit up and go get him. I'm torn on it for these reasons. I dislike it because it makes no sense, because Lewis is a good commander and she knows that Watney's best chance is with Beck because this is what Beck does. This is what he has trained for, is these sort of things. He's good at flying the backpack. Like, that's his specialization. And Lewis is a good enough commander and smart enough and rational enough that she wouldn't decide to go do that. In fact, the part where she tells him to unclip her later is in stark contrast to the book. Like in the movie, she says her thing won't go far enough, and she tells him to unclip her so she can go get him.
Yeah.
In the movie, or the book, it's literally opposite, where Beck says, "Look, I could unclip and I could go further if I need to." Like when they're talking about it, when they're planning it, and she's like, "No, absolutely, you cannot," because she's worried about all the crew and not just Mark. What I like about, so that's kind of what I dislike about it. What I like about the change is that it makes sense for Lewis's character arc of her feeling very responsible, and it gives us a more satisfying emotional moment at the end with her being the one to go get him, because she feels like she was the one that left him there.
Right, and as an audience too, we've spent at least a little more time with her than we have with Beck.
Yeah, so I get it, and I like it for that. It's just, like I said, I'm torn on it. I think overall I like it more. I don't like all of it, which we'll get to here in a second, but I like her being I think I like the change of her being the person to go try to get him, thematically. Execution of that whole scene we'll talk about. Finally, what we talked about earlier, the epilogue where he becomes a teacher or a professor and all that. None of that's in the book. I like that. It's nice to have a little, cap off at the end of the movie. That was one of the things I didn't actually love about the book, was that it did just kind of end. I wouldn't have hated an epilogue of some sort.
Yeah.
And so we get that. We get, Beck and Johansson having a kid, and Martinez with his family. Well, Martinez going back, which I thought that was interesting, because he has a kid too, but he goes back on Ares 5, I think, which I thought was interesting. Yeah, so just kind of wrapping everybody up. I enjoyed that. I like that. It was a nice change. And that's it for Better in the Movie. Overall, though, just to sum up on Better in the Movie, they do a lot of things really well. It's just a really faithful adaptation, and there's very little that they do better. There was a few things that I mentioned. Most of it's just doing the book really well, which is an achievement sometimes for
totally.
for our show. So let's move on to Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
One thing I like, and now I can see why some people would say this is better in the movie. I don't necessarily think so. They streamline all of the farming stuff early on. That's like the first 100 pages of the book. And now I find it really interesting and fascinating for him to be doing all this. He does a bunch of math about how much food he needs and how much soil he needs and how much water he needs and how he's going to make it and all these different things. And there's several different processes in making the water, and we really only see one. Although that one is very accurate-ish to the book, where he builds that like tent thing and burns hydrazine, and that's what happens. And then he does cause an explosion, but it's the reason for the explosion is slightly different in the book, but it's close enough-ish, kind of. But I just one of the things I liked about the book was all of the problem solving and all of the sort of seeing his thought process. And that just gets streamlined quite a bit in the movie for understandable reasons, because we got to get to more of the, there's a lot to get to in the 2.5 hours. I just like that. I like that the math, the science, the problem solving more than the math and science. I like seeing the thought process of how somebody would figure out these problems.
Well, it's because you're a big old nerd.
Sure. And we get that in the movie. We get him problem solving, but that's really what this book is all about, is extreme problem solving. Yeah. And so seeing all of that process is really interesting to me. And we just get sort of a streamlined version in the movie. It's pretty well done, but I just like seeing all of it. I talked about Venkat Kapoor instead of Vincent Kapoor. I just don't know why you would change that. I mean, other than to anglicize it. And maybe because the guy they didn't get an Indian American, or they got Chiwetel, I can never pronounce his name, Ejiofor, Chiwetel Ejiofor, who I don't believe, maybe he is Indian. I can't remember.
Oh, I don't know. I thought he was.
He might be.
I thought it was a very diverse cast.
No, it is, yeah, and that's how all of the characters. Martinez is Hispanic in the book. Johansson's a woman. Lewis is a woman. Vogel is German, I believe, German. But yeah, it is fairly diverse, but most of the diversity is inherent to the book. Like, most of the people are described as whatever they are in the movie is how they're described in the book.
Oh, his parents are Nigerian.
That's what I thought. I thought it was from his parents were from an African country, but I couldn't. So that's, I think, maybe part of the reason, but they still left Kapoor. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyways, I just thought it was an interesting change. One of the things, and maybe they left this in, and I just didn't see it, and because it could be a little Easter egg for book readers, and it's a throwaway line in the book, but they all have tattoos. They all went out before the mission and got tattoos of their Mars numbers. Because there's a line about how one of them was really scared about doing it. Anyways, it's like a character moment. But I thought it was kind of neat. They all go and they get tattoos of whatever number person they're gonna be on Mars. So there's been 2 Ares missions before them with 6 people each. So they're 13 through 18. So that one of them gets who I think Lewis was the first one out of the ship. So she has a 13, and then on down the line, as they step foot on Mars, that's their number. So they all get a tattoo of their number.
That's cool.
Yeah, and I thought that would be a cool thing to somehow show at some point, not make a big deal. And maybe they do, and I just didn't see it. I was kind of looking for it, but not super hard.
I mean, to be fair, they are kind of covered up a lot of the time.
It would be tough. I don't know. But there's times where you can see their wrists, or because that would be a place to get it, would be your wrist.
Yeah.
Or something like that. You know what I mean? Would seem like the kind of place you would get that. Maybe. I don't know. In the book, when Pathfinder gets a signal, Mark Watney cries because he can finally talk to Earth again. Mm-hmm. And this is really the first moment where he actually thinks he might survive, when he finally gets a signal on Pathfinder and things. He doesn't in the movie, although there is a really good moment that's very emotional at the end when he's in the rocket and they're counting down.
Yeah. And
he starts crying, which isn't reflected in the book. So they kind of moved that. And I liked that. Mm-hmm. So they kind of changed where it happened. But I thought it definitely added to his character. And so I did actually, because that scene at the end does actually make me kind of choke up a little when he's in the rocket and about to blast off. It moves his that to a more immediacy of this is the moment where I'm either going to live or I'm going to die right now. So we'll see what happens. This is not necessarily better in the book, but it doesn't make any sense in the movie. He builds that little tent thing to make water there with the thing where he's burning. Mm-hmm. He leaves that running throughout the whole movie. It's set up throughout the whole movie and burning, but that makes no sense. He only has to make water once. He does it one time, and then once it's in the system, his water reclaimer just recycles it. Mm-hmm. So he wouldn't need to keep making water. So I don't know why that thing's still there burning way later in the movie. Doesn't make any sense.
That's true, because it would eat up oxygen too, wouldn't it?
Yeah, although he has an oxygenator and he has other stuff, so I don't know if it would be a problem, but he just wouldn't set it up.
There's just no reason for it.
There's no reason to be there at that point, later in the movie. He's made all the water he needs. He has extra water, because when he makes the explosion, he accidentally makes a bunch of extra water from the explosion, basically. Well, he just makes a bunch of it at once, pretty much. Okay, the airlock sequence. The airlock sequence is really intense and really well done in the book, for a bunch of different reasons. One is the lead up to the airlock sequence, which we get none of in the movie, which I think is part of the reason you didn't know why it happened. In the book, we start about halfway through, we start getting these interspersed sections that are in italics of a description of how the HAB canvas is made. And we get one paragraph every chapter. And it starts at the beginning of the process. And then the next chapter is a little bit more of the process. And then it gets in later and it's and then they fold the HAB canvas and it goes from here to here to here. And it gets flown from here to here and it gets inspected by all these people. And then it starts specifically mentioning section 109A of the HAB canvas is specifically talking about. And this is all leading up to that's the section that fails. Mm-hmm. So it describes the whole process of how it's made and how at one point it says before the airlock blows off, it says one of the last things we see of the description says, and there was something happened that resulted in a 4 micrometer wide tear in this one section of the HAB canvas. And we're oh shit. what's like, that's not good. What's that going to be? And they're like, and it wouldn't be a problem, but it's by the airlock or something. I don't remember exactly how it plays out. But so we get this building of this, like, why are we getting this? Like, why is he telling us about how the Hab canvas is made? And so it's building this tension. Like, what is this building to? What is this building to? And then the moment happens and it's actually the first non-epistolary moment on Mars other than when we go back and get the recap of the beginning of the movie. But it's the first moment with Watney by himself on Mars where it is a third-person narrator describing the events of the airlock being blown off. And those two narratives meet where the buildup of this Hab canvas, this one piece having a defect in it, and then the moment where the Hab canvas rips and the airlock gets blown off. So that's really cool. I like that sort of, why are we getting this tension building? Oh shit. He's fucked. Then this is the only other part where we get audio logs. So when that airlock flies off, Watney, his face mask completely breaks open. So he doesn't have, like in the movie, it cracks a few times and he puts duct tape over it. In the book, it busts out completely, and he is now trapped in the airlock, like 200 meters from the Hab. The airlock is also losing air, and he doesn't have a spacesuit that he can be in. So in the movie, he just walks out after he puts the duct tape over it and his suit holds a seal. He just walks out of the airlock and walks back into the Hab and gets a new helmet. In the movie, in the book, he's in the airlock for like a day and a half. He finally figures out how to seal the cracks. He finds the cracks in the Hab. He has to make a fire so that he can find the cracks in the airlock. And then he seals those with duct tape, I think, or resin or something. And then he has a patch kit for his suit, and he cuts one of the arms off his suit and glues it over the face hole, and then glues the arm shut and keeps his other arm inside the middle of the suit, basically. And so he's in this really leaky suit, and then he rolls the airlock back to the Hab by slamming against the side of it and rolling it, because it's on its side facing the Hab. He rolls it, he slams his back against the Hab because they're in low gravity, and he like pushes off and hits the other side and rolls the Hab over the course of like a day, or the airlock back to the Hab. And then so that way he's close enough so that, because he knows his suit's going to lose air, so that way when he gets out of the airlock, he can get inside really quick, and then he grabs another helmet and another suit or whatever, and gets into a rover, and then gets a new suit on, and then goes back in and starts fixing the Hab and all that stuff that happens in the movie. But it's this big long sequence of like, it was the moment where I'm like, how is he gonna get out of this? Like, how in the world is he gonna get out of this? And in the movie, they just kind of really quickly, he just puts some duct tape over his thing, and then he walks out of it, and
right.
And I guess, to be fair, the big thing is all the crops are dead.
Yeah. The movie is way more focused on that.
Which is important, but I just really like that sequence of him figuring out, like, again, it's a similar thing to earlier where it's like, I like seeing step by step how he gets through this, like, because his faceplate is completely broken. Yeah. And he's 200 meters from the Hab in an airlock that's leaking. And it's like, how could you possibly get out of this? And then he figures out a way, and in a way that makes sense and seems, like, holy cow, yeah, that would probably maybe work. And so I find that fascinating. So I was a little disappointed that sequence wasn't longer in the movie and didn't have all of that stuff going on in it.
Yeah.
But I talked about this earlier. He loses contact with Earth before the trip because he fries Pathfinder. I like that because I like that there's some added tension of...
Yeah, it's interesting.
That he can't talk to Earth anymore. And it adds, and especially since the whole sandstorm bit, which is kind of interesting, and especially how he figures out how to get out of the sandstorm once he figures out he's in it. It's all interesting, but it wouldn't make sense if he could talk to Earth, so he had to not be able to talk to Earth in the book for that part. So yeah. I like that. But when they changed the whole rover trip in the movie, I can see why they just left him being able to talk to him, because it didn't really matter that he couldn't at that point. Final thing, and this is the big one. We put the pin in the Iron Man moment.
Yeah.
The Iron Man line is it word for word from the book. Hey, Watney said over the radio, I've got an idea. Of course you do, Lewis said. What do you got? I could find something sharp in here and poke a hole in the glove of my EVA suit. I could use the escaping air as a thruster and fly my way to you. The source of thrust would be in my arm, so I'd be able to direct it pretty easily. That's word for word from the movie. Mm-hmm. How does he come up with this shit? Martinez interjected. Lewis considers it for a second. Could you get 42 meters per second that way? Watney says no idea. And then she says, I can't see you having any control. If you did that, you'd be eyeballing the intercept and using a thrust vector you can barely control. I admit it's fatally dangerous, but consider this, I'd get to fly around like Iron Man. We'll keep working on ideas, Lewis said. Iron Man, Commander. Iron Man. And then she says, maybe it's not such a bad idea. And Martinez goes, what? No, it's a terrible idea. Mm-hmm. And she goes, well, yeah, that is a terrible idea. But, and that's where they come up with the idea to use the bomb. They do all that's the same. They make a bomb, they blow a hole out the front so that it slows them down. But, so it's dismissed. That's the line in the book. They say that, they make the jokes. It's like word for word the same scene. But then in the movie, he does it. And I couldn't believe that they did that. So the final scene in the book, Beck flies out and gets them, and then they come back. Like, it's kind of anticlimactic, and I think the movie was like, this isn't drama. There's not enough drama here. Yeah. If Beck just flies out, gets to be fair, to me, all the drama is in all the stuff before that. And we're going too fast. Oh, we're off course. Oh, we're going to burn the jets. Now we're going way too fast. Oh, how are we going to slow down? So we're going to build a bomb. I mean, they make a bomb. I don't know how you get more climactic than a bomb, but I guess I still can understand the moment where Watney gets saved. They need it to be a bigger moment. So they add this, like, I still think all they had to do was not have him do the Iron Man thing. Yeah. Just, if you want, have Lewis go get him, have her not have enough rope, and honestly have her detach and go try to get him and come, like, do whatever you want. Just, the Iron Man thing is so silly. Like, it looks silly. It doesn't really make any sense. It's really annoying because it's something that is brought up in the book and then dismissed out of hand. Yeah. Like, to then decide, no, we're gonna do that. It's like, God. And then it doesn't make any sense in the movie because it just stops shooting out air all of a sudden. Like, I guess the idea is he's holding it shut, but like, eventually he uses it to fly for a long time, but then after a while, it just stops. It stops venting air. And for some reason, it still would be. I'm not sure why it wouldn't be still, unless I think it would be tough to hold that shut or whatever. Yeah. And then on top of that, they're never like, unless I missed it, they're never like rushing against time now to get him into the spaceship because he has a hole in his spacesuit. Yeah. He has a hole in his spacesuit. They're like, gotta be like, oh shit, you're decompressing. We have 30 seconds to get you in the ship. Which, if at least then it would have been like, oh yeah, okay, that makes sense. We got to get him in right away because he's gonna die in 30. Like, he's gonna get killed by the vacuum of space here if we don't get him inside quick enough. But they don't do that. I hate everything about that decision to make him punch a hole in his spacesuit and fly. And also, it sucks because they already did that in Gravity. Like, if you've seen the movie Gravity, she uses a fire extinguisher to fly around, which is it's silly enough as it is. But, like, I couldn't believe they did it. I was like, why? And I'm not even, maybe it would work. I'm not even arguing whether or not it would necessarily. Like, I don't even think it's necessarily, I think there is all the issues I've said where it would still keep venting. And then on top of that, now you have a very limited amount of time to get him into the spaceship before he decompresses and dies. And they don't really talk about any of that. They just kind of hand wave that away. Yeah. But I don't know why they decided that was necessary. You can still do all the stuff they did with the end and the rope and the tether and them wrap, like all of that. You just, because that's the other thing in the book, he's not far enough away where he has to do that. Mm-hmm. He's close enough where he can go get him. So just make him a little bit closer so that make him just far enough away where she can't reach him, but he has to climb and then jump. Yeah. And push himself out of it. And then you get a great moment of him like flying at her. You know, like, you could still do that. Like, you could do that same thing. And you don't have a guy flying around with a hole in his spacesuit at the climax of your movie. So disappointing. It doesn't ruin the movie for me, but it I mean, at all. It doesn't ruin the movie for me. It's just so disappointing.
Yeah.
It's just so disappointing because the rest of the movie is so good. And then there's this one moment at the end where I'm like, why? Why would you do that? It's frustrating. But yeah, that's my better in the book, that he doesn't fly around like Iron Man. He just gets saved by competent astronauts. I'm not sure if I have any other general notes. We probably should wrap this up anyways. Let me double check here real quick. This is a thing that's in the book. In your face, Neil Armstrong. A lot of those lines are all in the book, like the big lines from the trailers that everybody remembers. In your face, Neil Armstrong. Like that's in the book. I liked it. I thought it was interesting that the first thing Watney says on Mars after he goes and he pulls the thing out of himself, he says "fuck," and I was like, because that's the first thing he says in the book. So I thought that was a nice kind of homage to that. And in theaters, it was PG-13, so that was their only one, I think. I assume they used it there.
Was it?
Our version had 2 fucks, but that was ours wasn't the theatrical cut.
Oh, okay.
Because it was PG-13 in the theaters, and you get 1 F-word usage for a PG-13 film. So,
rating systems are weird.
Yeah. Also in the book, Annie cusses a ton. She does a bit in the movie. Annie, who's Kristen Wiig's character, like she's dropping the F-bomb like every other word in the book. Which that's kind of the joke, is that she's the PR person, but she like constantly cusses whenever she's not talking to the media. Oh, and then Project Elrond. I just want to bring this up because I thought it was funny. That is in the book where she when they're discussing the Purnell maneuver, and they said they call it Project Elrond. And then Annie's like, what the fuck? Like, Project Elrond, what's that? And then she calls them all nerds or whatever. I just think it's funny because who's at the Council of Elrond? Sean Bean.
Yeah. Playing
Mitch Henderson. Obviously, Boromir, who was at the Council of Elrond, or Council of Rivendell, or whatever it's called. So yeah, I thought that was a fun, like, little moment where I'm like, Sean, he can't get away from these Councils of Elrond. I mean, he's in a movie about space travel, and he's still a Council of Elrond.
I had one thing.
Okay.
That I wanted to mention. Donald Glover's character, on his desk, he has a blue bobblehead cat, I noticed. And as you know, I've been reading Saga by Brian K. Vaughan, and I love it, and I recommend it. It's 8 volumes right now. I consumed them. There's no movie, which is unfortunate because that means we can't discuss it on here. But I love it. So anyway, I'm not saying that the blue cat on his desk was definitely Lion Cat, but I'm going to pretend that it was Lion Cat because I like that.
Could have been.
Could have been.
Could have been. I have one more thing that I meant to bring up in Better in the Book.
Okay.
We can talk about it now. It's really great, and I'm really sad they didn't talk about it in the movie. It's a little morbid, but I thought it's played as a joke at the end of the book to some extent. So when Hermes decides they're going to go back to Mars, and they commit mutiny. That all happens the same in the book. They talk about it'd be mutiny and that sort of thing. All that plays out the same. Mitch sends it to him secretly in an email. All of it's identical. When they're going back by Earth, so they have to get the food to resupply. Implication being, if they don't get that probe full of food, they're all going to die because they won't have enough food. In the movie, or in the book, they have a plan in the event that they are not able to get the food. And it plays out in a discussion between Johansson and her father. When they're circling Earth, they're able to talk to each other in real time since they're so close. And this is right before they pick up the probe. And her father's talking about how scared him and his mom are for them and that sort of thing. And she goes, look, even if we don't get the probe, I'll live. And he's like, what? And she goes, we have a plan. If I don't get the probe, the other 4 are going to kill themselves, and I'm going to eat them.
Ew.
No joke. That's a legitimate contingency plan that they had, because Johansson is the smallest. Is the main. She's the youngest and the smallest, I believe. So she requires the least amount of calories.
Oh my god.
So that is a little legitimate contingency plan they have in the book, is that they were all going to take morphine and kill themselves if they didn't get the probe with the food, and then she would have whatever supplies they had left and then eat them. And it would be enough to get her back to Earth. And they don't mention that in the movie, and I was like, oh, come on. And then, because there's a nice little moment in the book when they do get the probe where Martinez is joking with her, and he's like, who would you have eaten first? You would have eaten me first, wouldn't you? You always did like Mexican or something like that. Like, there's some good jokes about it after they realize they're not going to die. But I liked that. I thought it was an interesting kind of thing into the way the contingency plans that people like that come up with. Anyways, let's move on to the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first, verdict afterwards.
Here's the thing. When it comes right down to it, there was one deciding factor. And it's the Iron Man bit. The book's better, in my opinion. If the movie hadn't made that change, I might have given it to the movie. Because the thing is, it's not... The movie is just the book. Like, it's one of the most faithful adaptations I've seen of a source material. Or at least as faithful as you could feasibly be to a book that has as much technical jargon and math and science in it. Not to mention, and is 370 pages, and you're trying to fit it into a 2.5 hour movie or a 2 hour and 20 minute movie.
And half of it's a diary.
Yeah. And so they obviously change all a lot of the diary stuff, but they still leave that in. There's elements of that. So many of the scenes are literally word for word from the book. Like the scene on the storm. I was literally like opened the book and was looking at it. The storm when all the lines they have are all identical. All of the numbers are identical. They do change this, which is really weird. The storm happens on Sol 19 in the movie and in Sol 6 in the book. I'm not sure why they made that change. It's the 6th day of their mission when it happens in the book and the 19th day in the movie. I'm not sure why they changed that, but whatever. But everything is just identical. All the best lines from the movie are from the book. All of the best moments. It's so faithful. And then they do the Iron Man thing. And it's... But apart from that, it's a great movie. It's a great adaptation. It's a great representation of science and the spirit of exploration and the resourcefulness of humanity and what smart people can do in tough situations.
Yeah. I was even thinking while we were watching it, if I was a science teacher, I would show this in class and pause it, and we would talk about what he did and like the science behind it. The science behind it, because it's all pretty solid science. They streamline it some, but and even more so to me, the thing that I love and I loved about the book is the failing and then overcoming your failures. Because I guess, well, like I said, he doesn't really have character flaws. He does fail a lot. He messes up a ton and makes all kinds of mistakes and does all kinds of stupid, like not even stupid, but just like things he didn't think about or whatever that it messes up. That we all run into in our daily lives all the time. And for us, it's usually just an inconvenience. For him, it could be the death of him. Yeah. But he then figures out a way to overcome that. And I think that's the thing that's really sticks with you about the book is, in the movie, is overcoming your own failings and persevering in the face of your own failure, which is like the core message of the book to me. And on top of that, all of humanity kind of coming together because China helps and everybody is rooting for him and all this sort of stuff. And it sort of represents the way that exploration and space exploration can bring humanity together. And I really love that about it. And so, yeah, it's a great book. It's a great movie, but the book doesn't have him flying around like Iron Man. So book's better. So chalk one up for the books.
Yes. That's going to do it for the 24th episode of This Film is Lit. That was The Martian. Katie, wait, we're going to tease you with what's next. And first, ask for you to go give us a rating and a review on iTunes, Stitcher, anywhere you download our lovely podcast. They're very helpful. We're up to 22 ratings on iTunes, which is cool. Also, make sure you subscribe. I'm sure most of you do that are listening, but that is also very helpful. You can also follow us and find us on any of the social media, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit, Goodreads, anywhere. Just look for This Film is Lit. You'll find us. Now, Katie, what is our next book and movie?
I have bad news.
What?
We've been saying episode 24
No,
this
it doesn't
entire
matter.
time.
Doesn't matter.
It's episode 23.
23. Whatever.
We really need to start checking that before we start recording.
Episode 23. That's
So-
going to do it for the 23rd episode. Now what are we talking about?
Next time, we will be talking about Jurassic Park.
Jurassic Park. Bum, ba, 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 ba. Sweet. You're reading it,
I am.
not me. All right. So the next one will be a preview of Jurassic Park. We'll also be learning something with This Film Is Lit. Not sure what that's going to be yet, but we'll see when we get there. Cautionary tales, maybe? I don't know.
That was what I was thinking.
I know. We'll see.
Yeah.
But until then, guys, gals, non-binary, everybody else, keep reading books. Keep watching movies. Keep being awesome. Be like Mark Watney. Don't give up when you fail.